In order to bluff the river, you must have the unblocker to the backdoor flush draw. Bluffing without this unblocker costs 0.13 big blinds. You can only raise this flop continuation bet 31% of the time with this combo, otherwise you're over bluffing. A mix of B40 and B90 is fine on this turn, but do not use B66.
Okay guys, so one of my biggest strengths as a poker player is definitely, without a doubt, the ability to punt off loads of money with truly shitty, terrible starting hands, and the 7-3 of spades is no exception. You might be looking at this spot thinking, how does he make this call? This call is actually losing on my hand chart. And as you can see, it is indeed losing. It's losing 2 to 3% of a big blind to be precise. This is a very small swing indeed, and if you were to look at a higher stake game with a different rake structure, this hand quickly becomes a call. What that means is that the EV of calling is balanced on a knife edge that the slightest gust of wind could swing it in either direction. If I have a skill edge, it's very likely then winning, and if villain has a skill edge against me, then it's very likely to be just like more losing than that. The correct way to think about preflop is not to lock yourself into a box of just copying the ranges and just doing what a chart says, but intelligently knowing what the baseline is and then being able to sort of modify your estimates of the EV of taking a play based on real life conditions. And the real life condition that I think is important here is that I expect to have a skill edge in this spot, in position, wide range situation, difficult spot for pool to play. I just expect to be doing well here. So I've got no doubt that this is a winning call in real life for me, as long as I'm not like tilted out of my head and playing my F game or something like that. So villain bets half pot here, which is definitely a more fishy sizing. It's not a bad sizing, it's just a sizing that more recreational players take than regulars in general. And we decide to raise. So this raise is borderline. In GTO, the hand is probably either always calling with a non-nut straight draw with no backdoor, or usually calling, I don't know which, and I really don't care. The premise of this video is that you can do whatever the hell you want if you can justify it with good EV estimation, you know, like thinking about what's going to happen in real life. And in real life, I think small blind is going to struggle here. Small blind needs to defend really wide. If they're betting haphazardly on the flop, if they're just betting tons of hands, which they likely are without too much discretion, then they need to be really loose here in defending against this raise. They're also going to have to 3-bet the flop, so they're going to have to take some really weird bluffing hands and 3-bet at some frequency, and they're also going to need to 3-bet for value with stuff like pocket aces and ace king. I don't think either of those things is going to happen often enough, so I think this is probably just the best play. Villain does go ahead and make the call. The 10 of clubs is one of these turn cards that's really quite good for our range. Like most of our bluffs on the flop are straight draws and flush draws at this point. All of our flush draws have just got there, and while villain can have flushes himself here, that's not really a concern to me because my range is more concentrated in flushes than villain's is, because villain's range is way more diluted by hands like King X, Pocket Pair, 5X and 4X that have to peel the flop, as well as some stuff like Ace Queen with a backdoor and things like that. So villain's range here contains a ton of hands that are actually going to call the turn and fold the river. So my plan becomes really clear. I'm going to triple off because I love putting loads of money into the pot with 7-3. It's a great hand to go nuts with, guys. So we go for the big turn bet here. This will work quite a lot of the time. Like there's a lot of auto folds here already for villain right off the bat. He's going to be folding a hand like ace 4 all of the time, 7's no club all of the time. Maybe even a hand like king jack of diamonds, like quite frequently here, isn't going to fancy it. I definitely think people are pretty squeamish in the face of a flush turn, especially after this action sequence. So I guess this is going to get overfolded. So villain makes the call after some deliberation. I think the timing is definitely important there. It shows that villain isn't in like a thoughtless frame of mind where they're just going to be snapping me all the way down or something like that. I think a few things are going on the turn there. One is that people just have a load of hands that can call turn fold river. Good poker coaching is all about getting across like simple things, distilling them in a way that the student can just understand and recognize patterns without drowning them in too much detail. And the way I would coach a private student here is I would say, are there loads of hands that you can conceive of that call turn fold river in the opponent's range? And if the student says yes, there's tons of those, I'd say, well, that's probably on average a really good spot for tripling off and just bluffing the river then. So there's tons of hands here like the aforementioned pair plus redraw, pocket pair plus club type hands, naked ace of clubs with a pair, just hands that perhaps should call down like at a decent frequency in GTO, but are calling turn because they have redraw and then folding river when that doesn't hit. We should also note here that the 8 of diamonds is a really good card for a range. Our 6-7 gets there, our 8-7 picks up some showdown value and probably doesn't need to bluff as much anymore. I might still bluff that hand for what it's worth, but yeah, I think a really clear jam with the 7 high in this spot, and villain does go ahead and quickly fold. This pocket 7's hand is pretty interesting. We go ahead and 3-bet here, as is totally standard. And villain makes the call. Ace-Ace-5, definitely a board that you want to use the smaller sizing on. Theoretically speaking, the opponent's range is a bit polarized here. They have a ton of trash that's just going to be indifferent to any sizing, and then they have an ace, which is indifferent to no sizing whatsoever, apart from like all in. So just using the small bet here is definitely a good way to go. This is already going to render a lot of like pocket pair and king, queen, king, jack, king 10, queen, jack, jack 10, 10-9 combos, 0 EV. So this is good. The king of diamonds turn, I think people go a bit wrong here. People tend to over prioritize showdown value in 3-bet pots because they're used to studying in single raise pots. So what I mean by that is that when we go ahead and bet here, there are a load of hidden benefits of betting that people don't really realize. The minor benefit is that if villain does have a hand like jack 10, queen 10 or something, they probably have to fold here. And in doing so, we're going to clean up a ton of outs. We're going to just protect our hand. But the main benefit is that there's a load of bigger pocket pairs in villain's range that are just likely to fold to almost all sizes there that are above a certain point. So I think the sizing is important. Like getting that right is definitely a skill that you want to work on. And it's based on how elastic, how sensitive the opponent's range is to bet sizing in this spot in the real world. The thing about a solver is, and the reason like that people get locked into copying the solver's sizing, is that it tends to prefer a certain size based on the premise that people are perfectly elastic, that they're reacting in this really sort of gradable linear way to all different bet sizes. They're contracting their range just enough as you increase the bet slider. So given that doesn't really happen in reality, you want to find what we'd call a sweet spot of sizing, right? And I think the sizing might actually be slightly too big, but what we should be trying to do here to truly maximize our true EV is find a sizing that just gets all of the jack 10, queen 10, queen jack pocket pair to fold at a really high frequency and doesn't burn extra money against the king, queen, or ace X, which is basically never folding. This is a spot where villain has two really clear compartments of their range. They have king X plus, and then they have pocket pair or nothing. And going for like a really big bet here, like 26, while GTO is going to be sensitive there, and it's going to be like, well, now I need to like call exactly this much king X, and it's going to know how to make that an indifferent choice for us. In the real world, people are going to be really good at handling that because it's really clear and it's going to just be a blunder with this hand, whereas this bet size is way better. I think we could have gone down to like 14.2 or something instead here, and that could be even better still. But yeah, the point in this spot is think about how your opponent's actually going to react to different bet sizes. This is human versus human. You can do whatever the hell you want. That's our motto for today. Don't feel like you have to click a hotkey just because that's the one you've studied. That's extremely rigid poker. It's boring. It's no fun. Have a bit of fun, guys. Get your creative juices flowing. Use the bet slider. Find the sizing that actually maximizes your EV, and you'll move up in stakes a hell of a lot faster. Alright, so in this hand we open the ace-king offsuit under the gun. We pick up a couple of callers. And we go to this flop. I think starting off with tons of bet here is good. Definitely a spot where your range can do a load of betting. Don't go like completely into a shell when you're multi-way, guys. This is a leak I see. And a lot of my students are sort of like overly tightening here. It's a spot where people won't be that stab happy, I don't think, in a 3-way pot. They're going to play quite honestly. This raise is a little disconcerting. There's definitely 8s in range here, but there's a ton of draws and stuff raising here as well. And because this is like a big in position raise, I wouldn't be shocked if this was just a weaker player. And I wouldn't be totally shocked if there was a bit of like ace queen, ace jack, ace 10 thrown in here as well. I think that's a pretty horrible play in this situation, but it's definitely going to happen. Turn goes check check, and we land on the Jack of Diamonds river. So the real skill here is figuring out what your hand actually is against your opponent's range. This is an extremely relative hand strength dependent spot, and there are a lot of factors here that are governing your equity that aren't always in play in other situations. So for one, flop was multi-way and villain raise. That's a highly polarizing action, and while there is a bit of like ace 10, ace queen, maybe some ace 5 or ace x of hearts in the opponent's range here, there's not a lot of that type of hand. We're definitely only coming in at something like, I don't know, our equity here is probably okay, but it's okay because villain just has a lot of like jack x busted flush draw, queen x busted flush draw, king high busted flush draw, random 4-5, like stuff like this. Like a lot of the reason our equity is quite good here isn't that we can value bet big and get paid off, because there just aren't a lot of second best hands paying off big bets in the opponent's range here, but rather it's just that we're against like bluffs that didn't get there and busted draws really often. So that really rules out big bet. The options here are check or go for like a really small block bet. And again, you can do whatever the hell you want. When you're going for a block bet, guys, there's absolutely no reason why you have to stick to quarter pot or third pot or half pot or any of these milestones that you've, constructed in training. You're allowed to bet tiny, so actually go for the 3 big blinds here. This is a play that has a couple of benefits. On the one hand, villain might just get here with some hand like King Queen of Hearts or 4-5 or something and decide to raise. And if I do get raised here, I'm definitely calling, because I don't buy for a second that there are many sets checking back double flush draw turn in a recreational player's game. I don't think 2 pairs checking back turn very often at all for the same reasons. So the only thing that I lose to is Ace-Jack on the river, and if that finds the raise, then, good for it. Ace-Jack can have some of my money, but it'd be way too easy for villain to overbluff if they just start bluff raising against that sizing. So the whole inducing point is definitely part of this, like bet calling is going to be fun here. The other thing that betting achieves that checking doesn't is it makes a few big blinds against a Jack X of Hearts hand or something like Ace X of Hearts or Ace 5 or Ace Queen or something. Maybe I could have gone a bit bigger, like maybe my hand is worth like 6 or 7 big blinds here, like 5th pot or something. I don't think it's worth much more than that, and we definitely want to leave the door open to villain bluffing here. A mistake I see way too often is people betting half pot or bigger, or even third pot in this spot. I think it's a big mistake. We do run into the Ace Queen here. It's kind of unfortunate that villain scared the hell out of us on the flop and slowed us down a bit there. Okay, that's a bit of an exaggeration, but yeah, had villain just called flop, maybe we're able to go bet there and make more money, but as it was, we had to respect the fact that their range was polarized, that they were repping sets 2 pair plus, etc. But I think we found a nice play on the river, and maybe we could have gone slightly bigger, but the point is, use your imagination there. My students are always overestimating like how much of an impact showdown value makes, and I think this is a key example of where that could happen. This is a spot where although we do reach the river with some degree of showdown value, bluffing can still be better. Poker is all about comparing the EV of your options. What's higher EV, option A or option B? The goal in poker isn't just to find a line that's winning money that's plus EV, the goal is to find the best EV line. So if you take a line that's plus 38 big blinds on the river, you might have blundered if a different bet size was plus 50. So in this spot, we go ahead and check. And by the way, this is another situation where solvers are going to say, oh, well, loads of lines are indifferent. They're all the same as each other. In reality, finding the right bet size can be a hugely important thing to do. So this flop c-bet here from a weaker player. I was in 2 minds about this. I thought this is kind of close, but I figure with the backdoor flush draw and the fact that people just c-bet way too much here, I can probably peel. I think this gets quite close in theory. I think it's still probably like a mix, but I decided to peel there. Almost timed out, actually. Not the turn we wanted to see, so probably just check folding at this point. But do remember, there's a big branch of the game tree where turn goes check, check. If you see me stalling here, it's more because I've got action on other tables. I'm 4-tabling here. So this branch where villain checks back is definitely like a big part of why we can call the flop. If we knew, for example, that they were always betting the turn, we wouldn't be able to call the flop. Sometimes you hear students say, well, why would I call the flop just to fold the turn? Well, the idea is that the villain doesn't always bet the turn, and then there's the branch where you improve as well, and you can actually continue, like you hit an ace or an 8 or a club or something like that. Okay, so on this river, I actually thought about checking, but then I started thinking a bit more about my opponent's range, and I was like, well, against cutoff, I have a lot less showdown value than I would against later position. I also just have less showdown value than I would if the river was a brick or something. And then I figured people are really bad at checking back turn with overpair plus, so probably this guy's range is capped to tons of like 6s, 8s, 9s, stuff like that. Ace, king, ace, queen, ace, 9. I lose to all of these as well. So I lose to a ton of the offsuit aces that are actually opening cutoff. I do beat some of the suited ones, but even if villain does have like ace 6 here, they may bet the river at too high of a frequency or something, and then I end up folding anyway. Plus the 10 is like okay for my range because I float a lot of stuff with this card in it and things like that. So all of that considered, I figured like turning this hand into a bluff is probably just way better than checking against a real life opponent here. You can see I go straight for the overbet. The idea with the overbet is that because people are too capped, if they've not hit the 10 on the river, they're almost certainly folding here. And if they have hit the 10 on the river, they may still fold when some straights get there and I can rep some Jack X. So I think this is a really good play. It needs about 60%, 59% fold equity, something like that. I think it's probably getting like 75%. It's definitely better than checking. Okay, it needs more than that because checking actually does capture some pot share here. Checking is plus EV. So I need to like grossly exceed the fold equity target in order for betting to be better than checking. But I think that's very much the case. I think I'm just getting way more fold equity than I need when I make this bet size on the river. If you like the way we're thinking, talking about the game, by the way, guys, whole load of more content over at carrotcorner.com. We have the Carrot Poker School. It is the poker theory Bible, and it is important to know theory. While we are deviating a lot here, it is important to understand poker theory. If you've got your foundation set up in a healthy way, if you've built your house with a good foundation on the rock instead of on the sand, you're just going to do way better when it comes to finding good exploits and finding the best line in the heat of battle. Check it all out at Carrot Corner. Here's another cool bet sizing spot. So queens here in the big blind, open from a reg under the gun, call from a fish on the button, burger, fish, king. If you order fish from Burger King, I don't know if they even do that. Okay, if you order the fillet of fish from McDonald's, I don't know if that still exists, but if you order that, you actually order a fish burger, you don't deserve to play the fast food game. All right, so queens here, three-way, going to start with small bets. This seems pretty normal, pretty logical. SPR is small, there's no need to rush pot growth here. Half pot's probably okay as well, by the way. Get called by the reg. This range is going to be mainly stuff like jacks, 8s, 9s, some 10x, that sort of thing. The ace turn is obviously incredible for our range. Like a lot of the floats that would call heads up that contain the ace are going to fold multi-way. So this card is worse for villain than normal here. I always like to say, well, what's different given that this is like a slightly unique spot? Try and notice those differences here, that being the factor being the multi-wayness of the flop. And the sizing we go for on turn there is pretty interesting. We could, of course, check, but we actually still have a heap of equity with queens here. Definitely we have enough to value bet. This is the spot where using anything above quarter pot just doesn't make any sense theoretically or exploitatively. So we go for this tiny bet here. Actually, like, click the hotkey I'd normally use, then I take some off of it. If I could redo this spot, I'd actually make the sizing even smaller. Like, I think what I would do here is make a bet that villain actually has to call sometimes with like 9s, and that sizing would be something like 11 big blinds. Like if I bet like 6th pot here, I think that's an improvement. It's so hard to deal with. Villain very rarely has the kind of hand that can profitably draw against 6th pot, against my hand. So like villain's not going to have a gut shot here. Villain's not going to have a flush draw very often. Maybe king jack of hearts once in a blue moon, but we have the queen of hearts. Yeah, like they're just going to be dead to 2 outs a lot of the time, or maybe 5 outs with like king 10 or something. So the ace is really polarizing. Like they've either hit ace queen or they've hit like ace 10, or they just have something terrible for the most part. So checking here, I doubt they're going to bluff enough. They're just going to check back. It's going to go to the river. They're going to take free cards. So the best play on the turn is definitely going to be the tiny block bet. I just didn't quite go tiny enough here. I had the right idea. Sizing is like this gold mine, because in real life, the sizing that you pick has a dramatic effect on your EV. In theory, it has no effect at all. And this is one of the biggest like scams of modern day poker. One of the biggest like things that deludes people the most is this idea that like it doesn't matter what bet size you use. This is insane. So when you study with a solver, it's literally going to tell you that in many spots, there's almost no EV difference between bet size A and bet size B. While in reality, there's just this enormous difference. Like it's just going to be night and day. So yeah, I think 11 bigs or something on this turn is even better. Okay, this is another hand on the topic of using like really inventive, weird, do whatever the hell you want bet sizing. I actually feel like I just like owned this guy in this hand. I think this is like hilarious what happened here. I don't normally brag like that in poker. I think it's really like kind of cringy, but this is a spot where I really think this is a secret I want to share with you guys. This is so good for your win rate. This hand is just so hilariously powerful, this play that we're going to make here. So we see bet flop small with king jack of hearts. This is a sneak peek into grade E of the Carrot Poker School. This is one of the data points I got from looking at a ton of data on how humans play, but also you can just figure this out intuitively as well. The exploit, by the way, here is on the river. So we go for 6.1 here on the turn. Pretty normal with the gutter. You can bet or you can check. It's not really theoretically an interesting thing, but I do think that people don't slow play enough on flop. I do think that people don't. A horrible sentence. Pete, come on, get your English together. I don't think people slow play enough on flop, so there aren't enough flushes here, and therefore just betting turn and betting river is going to overperform. That's my idea. Now on the river here, I had to think about different bet sizes, and I decided to just quickly bet really small like a sicko. Okay, it wasn't that quick, but it was pretty quick. And I think a bigger bet is fine here also. But this is super overfolded, like this line. Like there's something going on here, and you might look at this and think this can't be overfolded. Villain's just going to call you again. And usually they are, right? That's true. Usually I'm going to get called again, but that's okay. Because I'm risking third pot, I need 25% fold equity for this to break even. And according to the data that we have in grade E, that we'll demonstrate for you there in charts and graphs, etc., plays like this actually get through significantly more than they need to break even. So it's definitely okay to bet like 75% pot here, to overbet, to give up. Maybe not overbetting without the spade in theory, but like who cares in practice? People just don't have anywhere near enough flushes when they just peel fifth pot and don't raise flop. So already we've kind of funneled villain into like a part of their range here that's going to struggle. They're going to have naked queen X, naked 9x, pair plus draw hands galore like 7s with a spade, 10s with a spade, etc. All of these hands. And on this river, when villain has something like 10s, or even like queen 10 or something like that, they're going to be looking at this play. And many of them, or some of them, shall I say, are just going to call. They're just going to be like, man, I don't know what this guy's doing. This is fucking weird. I'm just going to call because of the pot odds and I'm not going to overthink it. And against them, this play won't be very good. But equally, there'll be a branch of reg here that levels the absolute shit out of themselves, that sits here looking at this bet and says, why on earth would he go big, big, small with a bluff? Like, this is clearly a milking bet. He just has king, queen, or ace, queen, or something like that. I don't want to pay this off. I'm just going to fold. And that's going to happen way more often than you guys would think. The data says that this is true. My intuition says that this is true. We need hardly any folds. I think if I had to guess the fold equity here, I'd say that it's more than 33%, but less than 40%. That's actually what I would say. Maybe like 35%. And that's 10% more than it should be. That's huge. There are some people here, like some humans, that just level themselves into folding almost everything in their range in this spot. Because they're like, well, I don't beat any value and I'm just being milked. So yeah, this is funny. And this guy's like tanking. And I do this so quickly as well that I think it's just like, if you're a thinking human, who on earth just goes big, big, small? Like, you have to be so prepared to do that. So this is a prepared exploit, guys. This is the sort of play that, you know, you'll look this up in your solver and you'll be like, oh, it doesn't ever bet small. It's like, well, no shit, it doesn't ever bet small. It's in position against a solver that will react perfectly against a small bet. Why would it reopen for that sizing? There's a reason solvers don't use small bets in this spot. But who the hell cares? You can do whatever the hell you want. You're against a human. Okay, you can do whatever the hell you want, meaning if it's a good play. I mean, you can deviate from the solver. I'm not saying just click any button and it'll be fine. So there's two senses in which in poker you can do whatever the hell you want. There's a sense where you're telling the solver to shut the hell up. And in that situation, you can do whatever you want because you're like, no, I don't care that you don't small bet. I'm going to ignore you. And then there's the other situation where you just click a random button and that's kind of not okay. But yeah, this play is all kinds of funny and hilarious and good. And I just think that this is the sort of thing that if you call down here against pool, you will do terribly. Like, pool is basically never bluffing for my line. So the fold my opponent makes here is actually really good against pool. And that's why I want to be the wolf in sheep's clothing. I want to be the one person that's sitting in the pool here, sick enough to make a play like this. And when I say sick enough, you know, it doesn't take a lot of balls to make this play. It's not like I've gone all in for 2x pot. It's not like I need a lot of heart to do it. But you need to be like kind of twisted in the head. You need to be like on a different level of thinking where you're expecting way more folds than you need. So you can tell me what you think about this play in the comments. You might think it looks stupid and you might hate it or whatever, but trust me, the data tells the truth here. These sort of plays, big, big, small, this is the kind of exploit that will net you a lot of money if you do it in the right spot. Now, there might be spots where even bigger sizing is better, but yeah, this one is cool. So big fan of this. And finally, let's look at a 3-bet pot, going 12 big blinds here, big blind against button with ace deuce suited. You can of course just call this pre, you can also 3-bet it, doesn't really matter. Queen 6 deuce, pretty good spot for my range. I think you can check or bet, it's okay. The queen is usually the worst Broadway for the small blind or big blind here, just because button has more sort of king queen off, ace queen off than they would in other situations. On this turn though, our hand is kind of trash. This is another situation where you want to avoid the trap of thinking you have more showdown value than you do. Our hand is like really nice in terms of redraw. Like the ace river is good, the deuce river is phenomenal. We have these 5 outs against something like queen jack that we're pretty happy with, and bluffing is amazing. If we do have the best hand here and we make villain fold like ace jack or even ace 9 or 10-9 or something like that, we're cleaning up a ton of outs. We're like really just sanitizing our equity there. Like, we're getting the yellow cleaning in progress sign out and we're just basically disinfecting the floor of this situation. We're cleaning the hell out of it. So this is a nice cleaning bet when we're ahead, and when we're behind there's obviously a ton of fold equity from better hands like 7s, 8s, 5s, 4s, 9s, 10s, jacks. People hate underpairs, and for good reason. Underpairs are trashy. So this is like a pure bet for me. As far as I'm concerned, not betting this turn is a mistake. I don't care what your solver tells you. You should absolutely bet here in real life. Alright, so that was a fun session. If you like some of the plays that we came up with today, some of these inventive, creative lines, there's loads more of that in Cash Injection. It's the course at carrotcorner.com that deals in quick, implementable exploits that are sure to boost your win rate. I'll see you guys back here for another video very soon. Take care. Bye.